She almost walked past him. He was sitting on the steps of the building next door, an old man, 70s, in a worn coat that had seen better decades, a canvas bag at his feet, a small notebook open on his knee. He was writing something, not hurriedly, with the particular patience of someone who has all the time in the world or none of it, and has made peace with not knowing which. His name was Walter Caldwell. Maya did not know that yet. She stopped because he dropped the notebook. It fell off his knee and skidded across the pavement and landed face down in a puddle from the morning rain. She picked it up before she thought about it. That was the kind of person she was. Upstairs, in a glass office on the 14th floor, a man named Richard Sloan was already reviewing her application with the specific expression of someone who has made a decision and is looking for evidence to support it. He had circled her address in red, East Side. Not the right neighborhood for the Caldwell brand. He had noted her university, state school, not the right pedigree. He had prepared, without quite admitting it to himself, to enjoy the next 45 minutes. He was not, in his own understanding, a cruel man. He was a rigorous one. He had standards. The Caldwell Group had a brand, a reputation built on a certain kind of talent, a certain kind of background, a certain kind of polish that he associated, rightly or wrongly, with specific zip codes and specific universities. He called this discernment. He had never examined whether it was. That examination was coming. He did not know it yet. What Richard Sloan did not know, what nobody in that building knew, was that the old man on the steps outside was the reason the building existed. And that in less than 2 hours, he was going to walk through the front door. And that this Tuesday was going to be the last comfortable day of Richard Sloan's career. Hi, I'm Luna and this is Poppy. Today's story begins with a dropped notebook on a wet pavement, with a young woman who stopped when she didn't have to, and with an old man who noticed it's about what we see when we look at a person and what we miss when we decide, before looking, that we already know what we're going to find. Stay with us. If you've ever walked into a room where someone had already decided what you were worth before you opened your mouth, this story is for you. Stay until the end. Maya Assay had been applying for jobs in corporate communications for 7 months. Not from desperation, she was working, had always been working. 2 part-time positions that covered rent and groceries, and the particular cost of remaining hopeful in a city that charged a premium for it. From ambition. From the specific, well-founded belief that she was capable of more than what she had been given access to so far. She had a degree in communications from the University of Illinois, a portfolio that her former professor had called, in a letter of recommendation, one of the most instinctively strategic she had seen in 20 years of teaching. 3 years of work that had produced real results for organizations that had not paid her what those results were worth. She knew this. She was not bitter about it. She was practical about it. She was building towards something. It was taking longer than she had expected. She continued anyway. The Caldwell Group had posted the position 6 weeks ago, Senior Communications Associate, the kind of role that, if she got it, would change the trajectory of everything. She had spent 3 evenings on the application. Not 3 hours, 3 evenings, which is a different thing. She had researched the company's history, its communications strategy, the gap between what it said publicly and what the market heard. She had written a cover letter that addressed that gap directly and proposed 3 specific solutions. She had not heard back for 5 weeks. Then the call came at 8 in the morning on a Monday. Interview. Tuesday, 9 o'clock. She had ironed the blazer 3 times. She was the kind of person who prepared for things completely and then let the preparation go. Who understood that the work happened before the moment, not during it. Who had learned, across 28 years of being underestimated in rooms she had earned the right to be in, that composure was not the absence of feeling. It was the decision to lead with clarity instead. She was ready. She had been ready for a long time. The question was whether the room she was walking into was ready for her. She left the apartment at 7:40, 40 minutes early, because she refused to be the kind of person who was late to things that mattered. She was 2 blocks from the Caldwell building when the notebook fell. Walter Caldwell was 74 years old. He had founded the Caldwell Group in 1978 with a used typewriter, a rented office the size of a generous closet, and a client list that began with one regional grocery chain that nobody else wanted to represent. He had built it into one of the most respected communications and brand strategy firms in the Midwest over 35 years. He had retired at 69 quietly, without a farewell gala or a press release, because he had never been interested in the performance of significance, only in the substance of it. He lived alone now, in the same neighborhood he had grown up in a house that was considerably smaller than the ones his former partners had retired to. He had given most of the money away, not dramatically, through a foundation he had set up, to organizations that did the kind of work that required funding and rarely received it. He came back to the building occasionally, not with any agenda, just the way a person returns to places that were important, to see what had changed and what hadn't. He always brought the notebook. He still wrote in it every day, in the garden, in the mornings, at the kitchen table, in the evenings. Occasionally on the steps of the Caldwell building, when he felt the need to sit outside and observe. The writing was not for publication and never had been. It was for the particular purpose of making sense of things, of translating the noise of the world into something he could look at directly. He had been doing it for 50 years. He intended to continue for as long as the pen moved and the pages held. He had given Maya the page from that Tuesday. He had kept the rest. The rest, he thought, was not his to give. It was his to keep working on. It was a plain composition notebook, black and white cover, the kind that cost $1.50 at any drugstore. He had been using the same style since 1975. He went through 3 or 4 a year. He wrote in it every day, observations, questions, fragments of things he was still working out. Not a journal, exactly. More like a conversation with himself that had been going on for 50 years and showed no signs of concluding. The current notebook was 3 months old and already half full. He had started it in June in the garden of the house he had lived in for 40 years. On the morning after he had read a profile of the Caldwell Group in a business journal and had felt, for the first time in years, genuinely concerned. The profile had described the company's culture as sophisticated and selective. It had used those words as compliments. Walter had written in the margin, "Sophisticated and selective is what institutions call themselves when they have forgotten who they exist to serve." He had been thinking about it ever since. That was why he was here on a Tuesday morning. Not nostalgia. Concern. The notebook fell. Most people walked past it. 3 people stepped over it. 1 person looked at it, looked at Walter, and kept walking. Then Maya Ase crouched down and picked it up. She handed it to him. She said, "Here you go. The pages are a little damp, but I don't think anything is lost." Walter looked at her. Not the quick, evaluative look of someone processing a social interaction, the actual look of someone paying attention. He said, "Thank you. You're in a hurry." It was not a question. Maya said, "Interview. 9 o'clock. She glanced at the building next door. "Right there, actually," Walter said. "The Caldwell Group." She said, "You know it?" He said, "A little." He said it with the particular quietness of someone who is not lying, and is not telling the full truth, and is entirely comfortable in the space between them. Maya almost asked more. She had the instinct for it, the sense that there was something more in what he had said. But it was 8:51 and she had 9 minutes. She said, "Good luck," meaning it the way she meant most things, and she walked toward the entrance. Walter watched her go. He opened the notebook to a fresh page. The city continued around him. Taxis, coffee cups, people with their phones already out before they reached the bottom of the stairs. He had been watching this building for 2 hours. He had been counting. 43 people had walked past him. He had written each one down, the time, a brief description, whether they had made eye contact. Most had not. A few had looked and then looked away, which was its own kind of answer. One had stopped. He wrote the time, 8:51. He wrote, young woman, blazer, folder, interview upstairs. He wrote, stopped, picked it up, handed it back, said thank you, meant it. He wrote, stayed and talked, listened as well as spoke, knows the company better than the company knows itself. He wrote one line, then he settled back and waited. Richard Sloan had been managing director of the Caldwell Group for 4 years. He had been brought in from a larger firm in New York, which he mentioned regularly, and which his staff had learned to receive with the specific patience of people who have heard something many times and have made peace with continuing to hear it. He was 51, well-dressed, genuinely intelligent in the narrow way of someone whose intelligence has never been seriously challenged, and possessed of the particular confidence that comes from having been told you are exceptional so many times that you have stopped examining whether it is true. He had reviewed Maya's application the previous evening. He had found the cover letter interesting, more analytically precise than he expected from the profile, and had felt, briefly, a flicker of the kind of attention that a genuinely good piece of thinking produces. Then he had looked at the address again, the university again, the job titles, part-time, contract, none of the names that carried weight in the circles where he operated. The flicker had gone out. He had decided before she walked in, the interview would be a courtesy. 45 minutes, polite, professional, and then a rejection letter. In 3 days, that said they had gone in a different direction. Maya came in at 9 o'clock exactly. She sat down. She placed her folder on the table. She said, "Thank you for the opportunity. I've been looking forward to this conversation." She said it without performing it, as a fact. Richard said, "Let's start with your background. Walk me through your experience." She walked him through it, precisely without embellishment, with the specific confidence of someone who knows what their work has produced and does not feel the need to inflate it. Richard listened with the expression of someone waiting for the part that would confirm what he already believed. At 20 minutes in, he found it. He glanced briefly at his watch while she was still answering the previous question. Not rudely enough to be undeniable, just enough to communicate that her time in the room had already expired, that the conversation was a formality being completed rather than a process genuinely engaged in. Maya noticed. She continued anyway. He said, "Your most recent position was at a nonprofit, a small one, not a question, a categorization." Maya said, 14 staff, regional reach. "We increased donor retention by 31% in 18 months, Richard said. "That's a very different environment from what we operate in here. Our clients are national brands. The expectations are..." He paused, with the specific pause of someone choosing a word that will land where they intend it to. "Sophisticated." Richard glanced again at the address on her application. East Side. His fingers tapped once against the folder before he looked back up at her. He said, "You've clearly worked very hard." The sentence landed with the peculiar weight of something that sounded complimentary and wasn't. Maya looked at him. She understood exactly what he meant. She had understood it from the moment she sat down, the particular quality of his attention. The way he held the folder with 2 fingers as if contact with it were mildly inconvenient. She said, "The strategy I outlined in the cover letter addresses 3 specific gaps in your current positioning. I'm happy to walk through any of them in detail if that would be useful," Richard said. "We've seen a number of strong candidates for this role." He had already closed the folder while she was speaking. She had seen it, the quiet, definitive movement of someone who has reached a conclusion and is simply waiting for the room to confirm it. Maya said, "I'm sure you have." There was a pause. Richard said, I want to be direct with you, because I think that's more respectful than keeping you waiting. The profile we're looking for, the background, the network, the specific kind of experience, I'm not sure it's a match." He said it with the practiced warmth of someone who has given this speech many times and considers himself kind for giving it clearly. Maya said, "I see." She closed her folder. She said, "Thank you for your time." She stood up. As she reached the door, Richard had already opened the next document on his desk. He did not look up again. She did not argue. She did not perform distress. She simply left the room with the same composure she had brought into it. In the elevator, she looked at her reflection in the metal doors. She loosened her grip on the folder for the first time that morning. Just for a second, the exhaustion showed in the set of her jaw, in the way her shoulders dropped half an inch, in the specific tiredness of someone who has been holding something carefully for a very long time. Then the doors opened, and she straightened her shoulders again, and she walked out. In the elevator, she pressed the lobby button. She looked at the folder in her hands, the application she had spent 3 evenings on, the cover letter, the 3 specific proposals that Richard Sloane had not asked about and would not read. She had done the work. The work was real. It did not become less real because someone had decided, before reading it, that it wasn't worth their full attention. She thought about the 7 months, about the applications and the silences and the calls that came and the calls that didn't, about the specific cost of continuing to believe in something when the evidence keeps suggesting you should stop. She thought, I am still right about the work. She thought, that has to be enough for today. The elevator reached the lobby. She walked out, which was, Richard would later reflect, more dignity than the situation had deserved from her. If you've ever sat across from someone who had already decided what you were worth before you spoke a single word, leave a like on this story, because Maya deserved better, and so does every person who has walked out of a room like that one. She pushed through the glass doors at 9:37. 22 minutes, not even 45. Walter was still there. He looked up when she came out. He looked at her face. He did not ask what had happened. He said, "Sit down for a minute if you have time." Maya almost said she was fine and kept walking. Something stopped her. Perhaps it was the particular quality of the offer. Not intrusive, not pitying, just present. The way Dorothy had said, "Come on, honey, you're coming with me," in another story. The way the best offers are made, without pressure, without performance, with the simple certainty that they are genuine. She sat down on the step beside him. He said, "How long did you prepare for that?" She said, 3 evenings on the application. 7 months building toward this kind of role. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What did you propose in the cover letter?" She looked at him. She said, "You want to hear about my cover letter?" He said, "I want to hear what you actually think about the company's positioning." There was something in how he said it, the directness of it, the specific interest. Not polite interest, real interest, she told him. Not the polished version she had prepared for the interview. The actual version with the specific observations she had made. The gap she had identified between the Caldwell Group's stated values and its public communications strategy. The 3 approaches she thought could close it. Walter listened the way he had always listened, completely, without interrupting, with the notebook open on his knee, but the pen still. He was not taking notes. This was a distinction Walter had learned early, the difference between listening to respond and listening to understand. Most people did the first. The ones who did the second were almost always the ones worth talking to. Maya was doing the second. She was thinking out loud about something she had genuinely engaged with. The analysis was specific, grounded in observation, the kind that comes from actually looking rather than reading about it. He had interviewed hundreds of people in his career. He usually knew within the first 5 minutes. This time, it had taken less than 2. He was paying attention. When she finished, he said, "The third approach, about earned trust versus performed authority. Where did that come from?" She said, "Something I've observed across every organization I've worked in. The ones that perform authority tend to lose it. The ones that earn trust tend to keep it even when they make mistakes." Walter looked at her. He picked up the pen. He wrote something in the notebook. He said, "That's the most accurate thing anyone has said about this company in 4 years." Maya said, "How would you know?" Walter closed the notebook slowly. He looked at the building for a moment, the brass fixtures, the glass doors, the name above the entrance that was also his name. Then he looked back at her. He said, "Because I built it." The city continued around them. A bus passed. A phone rang somewhere. Maya looked at the old man on the steps with the worn coat and the composition notebook. She said, "Walter Caldwell, not a question." He said, "I haven't been in the building in 2 years. I come and sit sometimes. Old habit." She said, "And you were out here this morning." He said, "I was out here this morning." He said, "Go home. Get some rest. Come back Thursday at 9, she said. "For what?" He said, "For a meeting I'm going to request." He said it the way he wrote in his notebook, without hurry, without drama, with the complete confidence of someone who has decided something and sees no reason to perform the decision. The call had come Tuesday afternoon. Walter Caldwell's assistant, a woman named Evelyn, who had worked with him for 22 years and whose calls were always returned within the hour, by everyone, without exception, had requested a meeting of the senior leadership team for Thursday morning. No agenda provided. Attendance mandatory. Richard had spent Wednesday in a state of controlled unease. Walter Caldwell was the founder. He had retired. He had no formal role, but he retained a seat on the board and, more significantly, the specific authority of someone whose name was on the building and who had earned the right to be heard in any room he chose to enter. Richard did not know what the meeting was about. He had reviewed his recent decisions. The quarterly numbers were strong. The client roster was healthy. The staff turnover was, he paused at this one, higher than he would like, but not unusual for the industry. He could not identify anything that should concern him. He arrived in the conference room at 8:55. The senior team was already seated. Walter Caldwell was at the head of the table. Richard entered the conference room expecting another executive briefing. Then he saw Walter Caldwell sitting at the head of the table, and beside him, Maya Assay. For the first time in 4 years, Richard Sloan stopped in the doorway. He stood there for 1 full second before his professional training reasserted itself. He walked in, he sat down. He said nothing. And beside him, with a folder open in front of her, and the particular composure of someone who has been prepared for this, was Maya Assay. Richard's expression went through several changes in rapid succession. He arrived at professional neutrality and stayed there with considerable effort. Walter said, "Thank you all for coming. I'll be brief." He said it in the way that people say it when they intend to be brief and are. He said, "On Tuesday morning, I sat outside this building for 2 hours. In that time, 43 people walked past me. I counted. 43 people, including staff of this company, who walked past an old man sitting on the steps without acknowledgement, without eye contact, without the most basic social recognition that another person was present." He said it without anger, without theater, with the specific weight of a fact that had been observed carefully and was now being stated accurately. He said, "I know this because I counted. I sat there for 2 hours and I kept a record." He held up the notebook briefly, the same composition notebook, the same worn cover. He said, 43 people. I have the times and a brief description of each one, not because I needed the evidence, because I wanted to understand what the culture of this company has become. The room did not move. Richard was very still. He paused. He said, One person stopped. She stopped because a notebook fell. She picked it up. She handed it back. And then, because I asked, she sat down and told me, in approximately 20 minutes, without notes, without preparation, the most precise, strategic analysis of this company's communications positioning that I have heard since I ran this place. The room was very still. Walter said, "Her name is Maya Assay. She applied for the Senior Communications Associate position. She was rejected on Tuesday morning by Richard, approximately 20 minutes into the interview, on the basis of, and I'm quoting the feedback she received, her background not being the right match for our profile." He opened his notebook to the page he had written on Tuesday. He read aloud, "Earned trust versus performed authority. The organizations that perform authority tend to lose it. The ones that earn trust tend to keep it even when they make mistakes." He closed the notebook. He said, "That is the founding principle of this company. I wrote it in 1978. It is on the wall of the original office, which is now our storage room on the 3rd floor, if anyone has been down there recently." Nobody had. He said, "I am not here to conduct a personnel review. I am here because I have a responsibility to this company that retirement does not eliminate. And I am recommending formally to be entered into the board record that Maya's Assay be offered the Senior Communications Associate role today, with a compensation package that reflects what her analysis is actually worth." He looked at Richard. He said, "The rest is a conversation for another meeting." Richard said, "Walter, with respect." Walter said, "With respect, Richard, I'd like you to read the founding charter before that meeting." He said, "It's on the 3rd floor. Room 3B. It's been there since 1978. He said, "Nobody has read it recently. That's the conversation we need to have." Maya accepted the offer that Thursday afternoon. She sat in the chair Richard had offered her for 45 minutes on Tuesday and had been dismissed from in 22, and she accepted the role with the same composure she had brought to everything else. She did not gloat. She did not perform vindication. She simply said yes, asked when she could start, and went home to call her mother. Her mother answered on the 2nd ring the way she always answered, as if she had been waiting. Which she probably had, because she was the kind of mother who carried her daughter's important days alongside her own. Maya said, "I got it." Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I know. Not I told you so. Not I always knew. Just, I know." The 2 words that mean I was never not certain of this. The conversation with Richard was a different kind of difficult. It was not a firing. Walter had been clear about that. It was an examination. A substantive, uncomfortable, honestly conducted review of the culture that Richard had allowed to develop and the specific ways in which the Caldwell Group had drifted from the values that had made it worth building. Richard was a proud man. The examination cost him something. He underwent it without walking away, which was, Maya would later reflect, the most important thing he could have done. She had watched enough organizations to know that the ones that survive their moments of reckoning are the ones where someone stays in the room. Walter came to the building on the 1st Monday of every month after that. Not to manage, he was retired, genuinely and by choice, but to sit in meetings occasionally, to read what was being produced, to ask the questions that only someone who has built something from nothing knows to ask. He always brought the notebook. He still wrote in it every day. One afternoon, 6 weeks into Maya's tenure, he stopped by her desk. He put the notebook on her desk, opened to the page from Tuesday morning. He said, "I want you to have this page." She looked at it. His handwriting, small, precise, the handwriting of someone who has been writing carefully for 50 years. It said, "Earned trust versus performed authority." She already knows this. Find out why. She looked up at him. She said, "You wrote that before you knew who I was." He said, "I wrote it because it was true." He said, That's the only reason I write anything down." She kept the page. She had it framed, not prominently, not performatively. In the corner of her desk where she could see it when she needed to remember something, the notebook had been the first thing to fall. She had picked it up without thinking. That was the kind of person she was. As it turned out, it was exactly the kind of person the company needed. There is a specific kind of test that life administers without announcing itself. It does not arrive with clear instructions or visible stakes. It arrives as a notebook falling on wet pavement, as an old man sitting on steps that most people walk past, as the small, unobserved moment where you either stop or you don't, and nobody is watching either way. Maya stopped. Not because she knew who Walter was, not because she calculated what it might produce, because a notebook fell and someone needed it returned, and that was the kind of person she was. That is what character actually is, not the version you perform when the stakes are visible, the version you default to when nobody is watching, and nothing is obviously on the line. Richard Sloane looked at Maya's application and saw an address and a university and a job title. He saw a category. He made a decision based on a category and missed the person entirely. This happens every day in every industry, in every city. People are filed before they are read, sorted before they are heard, dismissed before the sentence is finished. The loss is always mutual. The person who is dismissed loses an opportunity. The person who dismissed them loses something they cannot easily name, the specific thing that Maya would have built for them, that nobody else was going to build. Walter Caldwell sat on the steps of the building he had founded and watched 43 people walk past him. He was not testing them. He was simply present. But presence, it turns out, is its own kind of revelation. The notebook was incidental. What he was really paying attention to was who stopped. So if you are the kind of person who stops, who picks things up without calculating whether it's worth it, who sits down when someone asks, even when you have somewhere to be, keep being that person. Not because it will always be recognized. Not because there will always be a Walter Caldwell on the other side of the gesture, but because that is who you are, and who you are, consistently and without audience, is the only thing that is entirely yours. Walter had said that to her once in passing, during one of his monthly visits. She had written it in her own notebook, a plain composition notebook, black and white cover, that she had started buying after she joined the Caldwell group. She went through 2 or 3 a year. She had not planned that. It had simply seemed like the right kind of object to keep, the kind that cost almost nothing and held everything. That Tuesday page remained folded inside the front cover, the first page in the notebook. The reminder of the morning everything changed because she stopped walking. She had not planned any of it. A notebook fell. She picked it up, that was all. That was everything. If Maya's story stayed with you, if it reminded you that who you are when nobody is watching is the most important version of yourself, like this video and subscribe to Poppy Tailies, and tell us in the comments, have you ever done something small for a stranger that turned out to matter more than you knew? We read every single one. And if you know someone who needs this reminder today, share this story with them. Thank you for being here. I'm Luna. This is Poppy. Until next time.